Just imagine waking up tomorrow and your job is gone. Money does not exist, your boss is history. The whole concept of Monday does not exist. No annoying alarms, no endless emails, no meetings, nobody begging you to circle back, touch base, or jump on a quick call. What do you actually do? If your first reaction is, I would finally be free, well, congratulations, you just had the exact same thought that almost every single human being had for 300,000 years. See, for most of human history, this was just a normal Tuesday, or whatever Tuesday was. Truth is, they did not have Tuesdays either. They did not have weeks. The entire concept of splitting time into 7-day chunks so you can dread 5 of them and barely enjoy 2 is a shockingly recent human invention, and frankly, one of our worst. So, here is a question that should really keep you awake at night. What did our ancestors actually do all day, like hour by hour, sunrise to sunset, without a job to attend, no Netflix to stream, no smartphone to mindlessly scroll, and no annoying newsletters to escape from? What did a normal day look like for a prehistoric human? The real answer is both deeply surprising, highly fascinating, and, frankly, a little bit embarrassing for us. See, it turns out those we spent centuries labeling as primitive were actually living far better in key ways than most of us are right now. I am not saying that to be dramatic. I say it because the evidence is overwhelming once you start digging. So, let us investigate. The greatest myth we have been told about ancient life is that it was basically a non-stop survival horror game. A hunter-gatherer wakes up. They try desperately not to get eaten. They grunt at something, and then sleep. Never invented farming. Ancient humans dying at 30. That's wrong. Totally off the mark. And the reason we believed this myth for so long is actually funny. It is because we looked at physical proof of ancient life and drew conclusions. We dug up sliced bones, marks, we found weapons, and discovered the leftovers of animals they had hunted and carved up, and assumed, brutal survival, day in and day out. But here is the kicker. We also discovered cave paintings. We found musical instruments carved from bird bones and mammoth tusks 40,000 years old. We unearthed jewelry made of shells, teeth, and carefully drilled stones, threaded into beautiful necklaces. We found proof of people traveling hundreds of miles on foot across landscapes with no roads, maps, or Uber, just to swap pigments for body paint. We uncovered graves where elderly folks who lived for decades with crippling disabilities were laid to rest with immense care, ceremony, and sometimes surrounded by flowers. That is not how a species acts when spending every single second in survival panic. That's the sign of a community with free time to play with, and a lot of it. And they did truly fascinating things with those hours. This survival struggle story is not just wrong, it is actually the exact opposite. In the 1960s, an anthropologist named Marshall Solins did something considered pretty radical for his time. He actually studied modern hunter-gatherer groups with close focus on their daily schedules, trying to grasp what life was really looked like before farming started, completely reshaped human existence. He studied the ancients and people of southern Africa's Kalahari Desert, Tanzania's Hadza, and indigenous groups in Australia, societies that actually kept their ancient foraging lifestyle alive into the modern era, and his findings shattered our common assumptions completely. Turns out, these groups spent only about 3 to 5 hours a day on what we would label actual work: hunting, gathering, cooking, and maintaining tools, or repairing their shelters. Just 3 to 5 hours. The rest of their time was entirely, beautifully free, just talking, resting, playing games, creating art, and making tools they didn't need right away, telling stories, and enjoying the complex social life of the tribe. Solins called these foragers the original wealthy society. Why? Not because they owned tons of stuff. They carried almost nothing in terms of possessions, and on purpose, since whatever you own is just one more thing to carry. but because they had the single thing every modern worker is desperately chasing but can never quite catch: unstructured, abundant time. Completely free, unmonetized time. Now, compare that to the average modern adult who, between their job, their commute, endless life admin, taking care of kids, and the exhausting overhead of managing a modern life, gets maybe 2 to 3 hours of real leisure time daily, if they're lucky. And how is that leisure spent? Staring at screens, just consuming content, built by algorithms to make us too anxious to click away. Today, we work longer hours under constant pressure, getting way less sleep than ancestors who hunted wild beasts with sticks. Let that sink in for a moment. Let us look closer, because this is where things get absolutely wild. They chatted non-stop and brilliantly. Imagine traveling back in time to watch a tribe of hunter-gatherers sitting around a campfire at sunset. The most surprising thing would not be the open flames, the fur, or those sharp rocks, or having no internet. It would be the talking. See, early humans were absolutely relentless, obsessed with chatting. Researchers studying modern nomadic tribes have regularly shown that a huge chunk of their free time, maybe 60 to 70% of their socializing, went toward chatting, and not just practical gossip, like where the mammoths are heading this season, or which way the local river flows. Instead, they gossiped, and they cracked jokes, argued, and flirted, grumbled about their neighbors, and told tales about things that happened ages ago, while guessing about mysteries they could not explain. Robin Dunbar, a famous anthropologist known for Dunbar's number, the idea that we can only maintain roughly 150 friends before our minds get overloaded completely, believes that human speech actually developed mostly as a way to bond, see, while other apes connect by physically grooming each other, picking off tiny bugs, and picking debris from each other's fur. It is incredibly time-consuming and intimate, and it builds deep trust and alliance. But as our social circles grew larger and way more complex, you simply couldn't physically groom 80 people. There just weren't enough hours. So humans evolved speech to achieve that exact same social connection at scale. You can verbally groom many people at once. Sitting around a fire, chatting with 5 people at once, keeps 5 relationships alive in the time it once took to build just one. Gossip in this framework isn't a personal flaw. It is the original social tool, the foundational software of our community. Meaning, every single time you call a friend just to chat about nothing, or gossip with a coworker over some silly drama, or spend an entire evening doing nothing but talking and laughing with the people you love, you are doing exactly what your ancestors did around campfires 50,000 years ago. You aren't wasting time. You are performing the oldest and most vital human activity in existence. Here is something that genuinely freaks people out when they hear it. The whole concept of sleeping for 8 straight hours a night is almost definitely a modern invention, not something we actually evolved to do, or even something humans historically did. It is something we were forced into by electric lights and the factory work schedule. Historian Roger Ackert spent over 2 decades studying historical sleep patterns in old diaries, medical reports, and ancient court files and literature, and found massive evidence that, before the massive rollout of artificial lights, we slept into separate shifts. First, sleep ran from dusk until about midnight, then came a period of being wide awake, naturally awake, not insomnia, for 1 to 2 hours. Then second, sleep until dawn. During that middle of the night waking period, people did not lie there anxious, staring at ceilings, wishing they could get sleep. They got up, talked with their families, they prayed or meditated or had sex, they smoked pipes, they visited neighbors, checked on their livestock. Many used it for deep creative thought. Old records show people intentionally using this time for brainstorming, writing, or the sort of deep thinking that busy daytime hours never allowed. Ancient historical texts are packed with casual mentions of first sleep and second sleep, as if these terms needed zero explanation. because they did not. Everyone knew what they meant. Everybody lived it. Only when gas lamps arrived in the early 19th century, followed by electric bulbs in the late 19th century made the night artificially bright and conquer that this natural sleep habit got squeezed and flattened into the single 8-hour block we now think is normal, except it is not, or maybe not. If you wake up at 2 a.m., lie there for an hour, feeling strangely alert and calm, wondering what is wrong with you, the answer is probably nothing. Your body is just doing what we did for hundreds of thousands of years. You are just missing the campfire, the quiet murmurs of your family nearby, and that incredibly deep, ink-black darkness of a world before electricity existed. One of the most stubborn myths about prehistoric people is that they were just technologically primitive. We think the Stone Age means crude, that their level of craftsmanship needed to make their tools, their clothes, shelters, and cave art was anything but simple. It was tough, highly skilled work that took years to master. Take flint knapping, the art of shaping raw obsidian by striking it just right to craft a blade with a razor-sharp, flawless edge. That sounds like something anyone could pull off with a rock. It really isn't. The stone has unique physical properties you must fully understand and predict. The angle, the force, and the exact impact point require absolute control. One wrong strike ruins the entire tool. Today, scientists and survival hobbyists trying to learn this skill have found that true mastery takes years of daily practice. Ancient hunter-gatherers spent massive chunks of their lives just perfecting this craft. Then think about tailoring in freezing climates. It was a massive job. Processing animal hides too. The wearable meant scraping them raw, curing them so they would not rot, and then hand-stitching them into coats using bone needles. Archaeologists have found bone sewing needles dating back over 50,000 years. Needles with tiny eyes that someone patiently bored through a sliver of bone using basic stone tools because they just wanted to sew. Because making a perfect stitch really mattered. Because they cared. And what about their art? It should make every single person stop in their tracks. Take the cave art in France, tainted 17,000 years ago, and the Chavit cave murals are maybe 36,000 years old. These are no messy sketches, they are incredibly alive, beautifully planned portraits of animals, wild horses sprinting, bison turning around, charging rhinos and lions, hunting together. They show a deep understanding of movement, light, and dramatic shadow that still shocks modern painters and illustrators who analyze them. Those ancient creators used the bumpy, curved rock of the walls to give their subjects three-dimensional depth, so when lit by flickering firelight, the only light they actually had, those horses and massive bison seemed to breathe and shift. They literally built moving pictures on stone walls in total darkness 36,000 years ago. Not primitive, it is absolutely breathtaking, and it proves that someone stood there, or lay flat on their back on the cold rock, painting for hours to finish this, not because they had to, not to put food on the table, but because they had a voice, finding a way to share it on something that would outlast every other thing they touched, lasting tens of thousands of years. If anything defines real art, that is it. They played honestly and with pure passion. Of course they did, because playing is not a luxury. Hardly. Play actually defines smart, highly social creatures like us. Crows play, dolphins play, wolves play, and humans, who are all of those, plus a whole lot more, play constantly and incredibly deeply. In fact, board games go way back to the very first civilizations. Take the royal game of Ur, from Mesopotamia, dating back 2500 BCE. We even rebuilt some rules from an old Babylonian clay tablet. But organized play goes way back before any city existed. Kids in every foraging tribe ever studied play in incredibly rich, complex ways, mimicking grown-up skills, making up rules, competing, and cooperating. This is universal across every single culture we have ever observed, and That kind of global habit always points to deep evolutionary roots. Wrestling matches, foot races, and target throwing contests. These popped up in ancient cultures that had absolutely no contact with each other. That is clear proof that competitive play is just something we naturally do whenever we have the time and energy for it. Absolutely. While we grind, ancient humans had a 3-hour workday. They had time, and play is also, quite simply, the primary way that young minds build their physical strength, social chops, and emotional intelligence. Back then, the line between playing and learning was practically invisible entirely. You learned hunting by pretending to hunt. You learned how to negotiate by playing high-stakes games with real drama. You learned to handling your emotions under pressure by competing and occasionally losing. Ancient kids did not have classrooms. They lived out in the wild, which was their ultimate teacher. They took unbelievable care of one another. Here is the part that really hits home, and the one that gets ignored in almost all popular stories about our early ancestors. Scientists have found skeletons of ancient humans who had severe, lifelong disabilities, challenges that would make anyone today unable to help out with daily survival in any normal, physical way. Yet they survived for years, even decades, because their tribe looked after them. Take the Neanderthal found at Shanidar Cave in Iraq, called Shanidar, one who had a withered, amputated right arm, was mostly blind in his left eye, had severe hearing loss, and had made it through serious leg injuries. He was around 40 when he died, which was incredibly old back then. He could not hunt, he could not even gather food. He would have been, by any harsh calculation of pure survival, a total burden, and yet, his group fed him, protected him, and kept him safe for years, not because they had to, but because they cared. We also found the skull of a child with Down syndrome, who lived in what is now Spain, and died roughly 500,000 years ago, surviving until they were 8 years old. The sheer amount of care needed to keep a kid with severe developmental delays alive in that harsh environment for 8 years goes way beyond what basic survival instinct normally demands. But someone loved that kid enough to make it happen. Researchers found proof of healed fractures in ancient skeletons. Healed, meaning that person actually survived long enough for the bone to mend together. That means they were fed and protected through weeks or months of helplessness. Someone sat by them, bringing food, keeping the fire lit. Early humans buried their dead with care, using careful arrangements, grave gifts, and clear ceremony. They mourned, they remembered, they marked the end of life as something that truly mattered. The bones of these early people don't tell tales of brutal, cold indifference. They reveal a story of communities that looked after one another in ways that cost precious resources and heavy effort, with zero logical benefit back then, except that this is simply what being human means. Yes, they also hunted, and was totally insane. We can't make this video without really addressing how they hunted, because it was easily one of the most unbelievable physical feats in the natural world. Before the invention of bow and arrow technology, appearing about 70,000 years ago in South Africa, and much later across other parts of the globe, our ancestors hunted mostly with spears, using a strategy that sounds like a total joke at first. It is called persistence hunting, and it is exactly what it sounds like. You find some massive animal, like a kudu, a wildebeest, or deer, and just follow it. No sprinting, no wild chase trying to outpace it. Since you can't outrun a wildebeest in a sprint, you just keep steady pace, tracking, following it at a jog through the brutal midday heat, through the absolute hottest part of the afternoon for hours. Every single time it stops to rest, because most four-legged creatures cool down by panting, and panting means they have to stop moving. You show up again on the horizon, and it panics, running once more, and you trail behind for 5 hours, 8 hours, sometimes even longer, until that animal is so thermally exhausted, completely overheated, so physically broken down, that it just collapses, unable to rise, and you casually walk up and finish the show. Why? Because humans sweat. We are one of the few mammals on Earth that mostly cools its body through sweating rather than panting, which means we can keep running in heat that completely paralyzes almost everything else. Our strange, hairless, sweaty, dichotomed, flat-footed bodies were custom-built by evolution for endurance, running in brutal heat. The gluteus maximus, the muscle that makes up your entire backside, is massive in humans compared to other primates, not because we sit around, but because we run. It is built for running. We grew it for that exact purpose. Those strange flat feet, another running adaptation. Our long legs relative to our torso, more adaptations. The way our heads balance on our spines with barely any muscle effort, so they do not bounce while we run. Running adaptation. The way we can breathe, separate from our stride. Unlike most four-legged animals that must breathe in sync with their stride. Yep, running adaptation. We were built from the bones out for endurance. Predators, built to chase. Hunters, unlikely, yet the most deadly hunters on Earth. So, when you run that half marathon and regret your daily choices around mile 9, you are using biological hardware honed over millions of years of evolution, meant specifically to chase big game across hot, wide-open plains in the midday. Crazy, right? You were built for this. Our ancestors were shockingly great at it. But what about real, deep rest? Here is the shocking truth. Early humans were actually far better at truly resting than we are today. Not just sleeping longer or sleeping differently, but resting deeply, mentally, and emotionally, in ways modern minds have completely lost the ability to do. Brain science has mapped something called the default mode network, a system of brain regions that light up specifically when you are not focused on any actual task, when your attention just wanders and turns inward. This system is linked to daydreaming, deep reflection, creative thinking, processing emotions, and what scientists call mental time travel, the power to replay past events and picture future moments. This is incredibly vital for mental health and daily creativity. But here is the catch. This network demands genuine, uninterrupted rest. To switch on, your brain has to literally stop processing external stimulation. Yet, modern humans fill nearly every single quiet gap with input, a podcast, a quick scroll, watching a clip, or checking notifications. To check, we have somehow, totally by accident, built a modern world where true mental rest is almost impossible to find without making effort. Our ancient ancestors never faced this. Imagine sitting by a fire, just watching the glowing embers, doing absolutely nothing special, letting random thoughts drift in and fade without a single goal. This was completely normal. It was the default evening routine for thousands of generations, and it likely brought massive benefits for their mental health, emotional balance, creative thinking, and that deep, subconscious problem-solving the human brain handles when you actually give it space. Think about why so many of humanity's massive breakthroughs in art, philosophy, or math, and early technology seem to happen during times and in places of deep, quiet stillness and contemplation. When the mind is truly unoccupied, it does incredible things. Our ancestors understood this deeply, not through modern neuroscience, but from simple, daily experience. They sat with their own minds for hours every single day, noticing patterns, connecting the dots, and asking questions with no easy answers. The tales they shared around the campfire about those mysteries, about why the stars moved, or where the dead traveled, and what animals truly meant, or how our world was born. Those very stories are the roots of science, of philosophy, of spiritual belief, and of literature. They grew from brains with room to wander. So, here is a final question for you. Would you actually want to go back? Tell me what you think below. Until then, take real good care of yourselves, and I'll see you really soon.